welcome you to Integrated Theology. This is going to be from Class 3, Lecture 16. Due to the nature of this, I want to take my time, and I suggest that those of you who are in the class now begin an extra day of prayer and perhaps some fasting. We're going to dig into a lot of the characteristics of spiritual entities. Today, the lecture will be entitled The Construct of Evil Pneumatic Men. We are told in Psalms 33 and 6 that the host of heaven were made by the breath of God's mouth, which is very important because when we look at it as a creative act, in many cases, we don't connect the breath and the word of God together simultaneously, or the breath and the logos as one. And so these beings had their origin in the very mouth of God. The Hebrew terminology is the Peh Yehovah. To determine the meaning of this phrase, we have to consider several things. Number one, God is simplistic, immaterial, infinite being who lacks physical form. And so from this perspective, then, we have to understand that the mouth of God deals with something other than a physical appenditure that deals with an exit or an entrance into the very essence of God. This must be understood by virtue of the manner in which this text is communicated. This ultimately will be expressed by virtue of his sheer power of divine will and intention. And so from some standards, the term mouth will deal with his will and his power, because the scripture says that he upholdeth all things by the logos, or the rhema of his dunamis. And the reason why I implemented that there is the logos combined with the rhema is because if there is no logos, there's nothing to speak about. The logos is the thought of thought. It is determination of what will be the consideration. And so when we deal with Peh Yehovah, it appears to be the unleashing of the logos of God through God's, number one, will, his choice of desire, number two, his purpose or intention. And when we speak of the purpose or the intention of God, this is ultimately in alignment with the expression of his sovereign power. And so the will of God then is connected to the sovereign power of God to cause existent reality by using his thoughts that are verbalized. And this is very important. When we speak of this God, he is so far past our understanding and the comprehension of his basic nature to simply think and to give molecular structure and physical reality or pneumatic reality to everything he thinks about. The divine will of God can be manifested through God's creative acts. And so when we speak of the mouth of God, we really can understand that the mouth of God can be considered to be the bringing to pass of God's will. That is the very intentions of God. And so again, the mouth, the orifice or the operation of information, that which allows people to know and that which allows people to understand what's going on in the consideration of the mind. One of the definitions of Peh, and if you are taking notes, you can look this up in Strong's or even in other dictionaries of the ancient languages. The number is 6310. And so another definition is mouth, which is an opening of a well or a river, etc. And so it speaks of an opening of something that is a reservoir, something that has the potentiality to flow out. From this definition, the mouth appears to be the opening by which the reservoirs of power make the logos illustrated by way of giving it reality. And so when the logos is illustrated, it becomes real, it becomes visible. It can be seen by those who are in the proximity, whether in many cases humanity or angels. Dr. Strong's defines the mouth as the means of blowing. And this is very, very important because essentially when we speak of blowing, we're talking about someone who is making a volitional choice, using the power to choose to exert this wind or to blow. He also includes in this definition the meaning of mind. And so when he speaks of mouth, mouth can be blowing. Blowing is an intention. It is a willful act of using the mind to exert something from what we call the essential essence. The mouth could be interpreted as the blowing mind or the mind that blows. And when we speak of it from this perspective, we're talking about a mind then that is extending its thoughts, that is active in thinking. And so the thinking process is connected to the mindset of willful deliberation. This refers to the action of the mind releasing thoughts by exerting these thoughts in ways that they can be, number one, manifested or revealed in objective reality. When we speak of the mouth, in the ancient Hebrew lexicon of the Bible, Jeff Benner, or some say Boehner, he reveals that this term pe is illustrated by two ancient Hebrew pictograms. And one is the mouth. It is the image of a mouth, which from this reference could mean the edge of something. And this is going to be very interesting and intricate. And I think you need to pay close attention to this. And so pe could very well represent the point in which the infinite, immaterial God with and his power with this word, he brings forth the finite realities, both of material and immaterial. And so even the spirit realm has finite potentiality. The fact that it was created indicates that it is finitely eternal. And so this indicates that there can also be finite transcendence, existence beyond time and space as we know it from the human perspective, but yet it is not infinitely eternal. And so the Logos is the edge of the ultimate existence of the infinite. And this brings us to a very important landscape because when we consider the Logos and we consider him to be the point of existence where now the infinite touches the finite or causes the finite, then he becomes, as the Logos, as the mind of mind, as the thought of thought, he now becomes the cohesive essence or substantial reality. And whenever I speak of essence concerning God who is simplistic, I'm talking about his now functionality of the mind. And so we have to move from a theological to a psychological and a philosophical point of view, understanding that thoughts do have existing essential reality. And so, again, the Logos is the very edge of the infinite that brings forth the finite. The utterance of this Logos is the release of the thought of a thinking God from eternity into the created space. Remember, he had to create nothingness or space to be able to put reality within that space. And so the utterance of this Logos is the release of that thought of a thinking God. And this thinking God is dwelling in eternity, and he released into the created space the imagery of his thoughts, of his Logos, and solidified it with what we call material existence. The Ruach Pe Yehovah, the breath of the mouth of God, could exegetically be called the mouth breath of God, the existing one. Remember, Jehovah, some say self-existing, some say existing. Either way, we know that he did not come into being. He did not bring himself into being, because to do so, you have to have being to impact being. Therefore, God was always in existence, and he needs nothing to sustain him. No sleep, no additives, no food, no oxygen. As a matter of fact, he is divine breath. And so the mouth breath of God, the existing one. The breath or ruach can also be defined from the Hebraic thought as mind or spirit, and this is very important. The inner being or the intellect and the will. And so the breath of God then seems to be connected to the mind. And when we talk about the mind, we're talking about the mensiological factors of a being. Remember, mens can deal with the totality of the mind, which is intellect, emotion, and will. And mens can specifically deal with the intellect. Because God is simplistic, the thought of the inner being cannot have the same meaning. What would be the inside of something that is infinitely the same, infinitely simplistic? And so when we think of the inner being, we have to think of then something that is other than a movement within substantial reality. So we have to understand it, but it cannot mean literally a position within a being, but rather it speaks of the substantial being of that reality. It deals with the functional being of God's intellect, will, and essentially his thoughts that are released. And so it could deal with the will and the volition of God. Now, Psalms 33 and 6 could be rendered in the following manner when we understand this. And all the host of them were made by the breath, mouth, or the mouth breath. By the willful extending of his mind, intellect, emotion, and will from his infinite existence to the finite created existence. The heavens are material and created. They extend into the spirit realm, which is also created. And so you have an overlapping of pneumatic and materialis, spiritual realm and the natural realm. And they are integrated into one commonality, the fact that they are created. And so the heavens are material and created. They extend into the spirit realm. And then we have to come back to the understanding that everything that came into existence, they have finite existence. They are not eternal. They do not yield from Ancient of Days into the eternal past. And so the host of heaven are created from the infinite God and are now finite, eternal beings. This reveals there is a state of finite or of the finite in eternity of the spirit realm. Only God is infinite. Therefore, to understand that only God is infinite, we come to the realization that only God has all power over all created and over all reality. Even the evil pneumatoi are composed of the mouth breath of God. They were created all at once, given divine wisdom and given divine knowledge. It is believed that they even witnessed the creation of the heavens. And so this gives them an understanding of the natural realm and perhaps natural laws to an extent. They are immaterial spirits, and immaterial reality, remember, is fused with material reality. It is fused with the existence of material reality and therefore can move in and out of material reality. It is also believed at a point in time that spiritual entities, we call angels, that their meeting place was on the planet Earth, and specifically could have possibly been a Garden of Eden that existed before Adam. And this is alluded to because when we go to the complex descriptions of Lucifer, it says that thou hast been in Eden, and then speaks of all the stones of his covering. And so it is believed by some that spiritual entities, they would gather in the garden and they would do their business, which was to orchestrate the will of God. And so, and then when you believe in the so-called gap theory, or that period between Genesis 1 and 3, that something happened to cause the earth to be tohu vabohu, which means a ruin that typically deals with some type of judgment. And so they are immaterial spirits. They are winds with intelligence, having the power of thought. If we were to use this symbolically and philosophically, there are times that even in I'll say a body or a church, a building, that there is a current of air. You open one door, another door closes because the vacuum of the air that's circulating. If we speak scientifically of oxygen or a current of air, a movement of air existing within an existing edifice, does it stand to reason that if material essence can be within the vacuum of a building, that perhaps there can be an integration of spiritual entities that are common to air or wind? They were created as spirits, but through their mental perspective, they became those who are the mutated, or the Latin term, mutated, or mutated, lapse sunt. They became the quality of the fallen, the quality of their minds, their understanding, their intellect became twisted and incapable of thinking within it and within any type of connection to divine law, divine truth, divine essence. And so they are a trichotomic, divine, misshapen through their functionality existence. And so, again, when we deal with mutated, lepse sunt, we talk about the mens, the mind, becoming so corrupt that it is unfixable, unalterable, and consistently spiraling into what we call a degree of entropy. Spiritual entropy can be one of the worst entropies because spirit then cannot be recreated by the individual. Spirits cannot be fixed by the individual. And if these divine spirits were once connected to God, they now, in their mutated form, are essentially hostile to everything about God. They are hostile to every glory carrier, every spirit-filled individual, and they are hostile to the peace that passeth all understanding, and they will do something that will forever disrupt your peace in a cyclical manner, because in one point in time, they figure if we keep up the pressure, we will break the people of God. We will wear them out mentally, emotionally, and volitionally. They will not have the power or the ability to choose, even though it is a part of their nature. We will cause them to misshapen their nature, and we will control them when it pleases us. And in those times, if we can do it enough, we can cause them to separate themselves from the grace of God that will invoke and eventually allow us to penetrate through the act of spiritual distillation. And through this spiritual distillation, one thought at a time. And before it's over, we will have an orchard, a garden, and they will not even know that it exists. And so they are antagonistic to the fruit of the Spirit. Everything in you that causes you to reach a state of maturation, they hate. They will work on. They will bring things to you so you can negate and so you can cause the very fruit that was meant to be a blessing to you to become null and void. Fallen angels have become darkened in every way. Disembodied hybridal giants have become actualized in their desire to be gratified in their mutated hybrid instincts. Remember, we said that when we deal with demons, there are two classifications according to basic Christian lore. There is fallen angels who retain their physiology, or I should say their pneumatic corporeality. And then there are disembodied spirits who are believed to be mutated hybrids from angels and humans. The thing about these demons that are immaterial is that they, in their mindset, while they walk the earth according to this, I'll say, concept, according to this belief system, they were literally insane. The act of merging fallen angelic material with fallen humanity. Always remember, again, as I said before, spiritual entropy, it goes into a state of entropy much quicker, much more intense, much more comprehensive. And so the overwhelming entropy of the mental state of fallen angels impacted the state of fallen humanity from an even worse point of view. And that's why demons seek to experience the same madness that they desire. Madness to some is a prison. but madness to those who revel in it is express freedom to think, to be, to do whatever you desire without restraints. And so these disembodied hybridal giants, they seek to inhabit a human. When they inhabit a human, it's generally called possession. But before we get to possession, there is oppression, there is suppression, there is depression. Because these four-dimensional beings still have access to the material world, which our bodies are a part of, they have access to the physical machinations or machinery that we operate through our body. Therefore, they can connect to the mind. They can impart thoughts and feelings. They can disrupt and intersect. Jesus at one point even said, when the word is not understood, these fowl of the air can pluck it right out. How can you pluck out what somebody has heard? How can you pluck out ideals, concepts, and principles simply because it's not understood? And when we don't fully and clearly understand the helmet of salvation, it is possible for them to consistently pluck out knowledge and consistently replace it with obscurity or obfuscation to the point where we are dismantling even the neural pathways that are positively built because of the word. I found out that neural pathways never just simply disappear, but they can be abated and they can be quelled when a person stops using those neural pathways, which means they stop thinking a certain way. Then, even when they're myelinated, they become substratum. And those things that you begin to think about the most will rise and begin to be the active pathways in which you think. And that's why spiritual entities, fallen entities, don't want us to change our mindset. The more we think and focus on those things that they desire, the more powerful that pathway becomes, the more centralized and interconnected it becomes to the entire brain. And so their desire is to live out their pleasures through those bodies that they possess, oppress, or suppress. And keep in mind, we said again, spirit, breath, breath. There's a current of air in here right now. If you open one door, you would hear another one close because of the suction, because of the what movement, and because of the balance of the airflow. Does it not stand to reason that spiritual entities have the same access? Wherever you find oxygen and feel it moving and feel the timbre of the oxygen. What do I mean by timbre? We're talking about quality, the color, the life-giving sustenance. Is it possible that spiritual entities can now produce death-giving substantial reality through their prayer, through their presence? Always remember some of the lore of vampires, specifically the Nosferatu. Some called him the Nosfractor, which means the plague bringer. Spiritual entities thrive in plagues. And this is all the time we have. And we will now turn it into Q&A if you have any.